we try and make these events as interactive as possible. So we really welcome questions from the audience. If you have questions as the conversation is going along, please post them in the Q&A section. The chat function is turned off for that. So if you have questions, put them in the Q&A section, which is down in the menu bar at the bottom, and we'll get to those. And sometimes we'll group those questions together towards the end to get them to either Ash or Nolan. Ash, you've got the cigarette going. That means it's serious time for the conversation. So take it away.
David, thanks a lot. We're stoked to have you at VII. So looking forward to many more good things in the future. Thanks for being here, and Photo Wings for making all this free. I don't want to talk too much because you guys have heard all my stuff before. I am absolutely thrilled, Nolan, to have you not just here, like talking today, but in my life. You've become a dear friend in a very quick amount of time. You're a man of deep integrity, and you've taught me a lot about photography and about life. So I'm really, really happy that we can share a little bit of our story together. And I see you very much as a brother in arms in this struggle that we're in. So I'm giving it to you, and we just chat, man. You show work, we talk.
Cool. No, thanks a lot. That means really a lot to me. And, you know, I've told a lot of people this, but, you know, when I first started, you know, really taking photography seriously, it was in class at NYU Tisch. And, you know, when you gave your presentation there, and at that point, I didn't even really know what a documentary was, or like photojournalism for that matter. And after your presentation, it just like totally inspired me. I was like, damn, I didn't even know you could do something like this, and I didn't even know it was like a career option. So nah, it's really a big honor for me to be here on VII. And yeah, doing the VII Mentor Program was really amazing because I had a really amazing mentor, Sarah Terry. But I was also encouraged to just, you know, form relationships with basically anyone in the agency. So like Ash or Ed Cashy or Maggie Stieber, or, you know, Philip Blankenstop, or, you know, just a ton of people, Jocelyn for sure. So yeah, I just want to take that time to publicly thank VII as an organization for my time in the mentor program. It was really transformative. So
but
yeah.
You were so clear. You wanted this like to be, it's so funny you say that, because it seemed to me when we met at Jeffrey Scales's class at NYU, and then when you demanded we have coffee, and we did, like you seemed so absolutely clear, like this is it, like this is what you're going to do. There is no question. Like you went over to Perpignan in France, and you hung out at the VII booth, you helped out, you met Gary, you met Joss, you met Chris, you met everybody. Like you went after this so hard, and it's very rare to find people in this industry with that level of passion, but also ability to get off their ass and do it, you know? And you did it, man. Like you would have gotten to where you are now, regardless of me or VII or anybody else. Like you would have found a way. There's not many people like you out there, but you're one of them.
Man, thanks. No, it was, I guess it feels like it was a lot harder than it was. I don't know, it's weird. Like I feel like I busted my ass or grinded a lot, but it never really felt like it because I've always like loved what I'm doing. So I know you said like it was like clear from the beginning that I wanted to do this, but yeah, I guess I just, like I said, when I saw you present, I didn't even realize that that was something someone could do. And I always loved photography and just being creative and going out into different places and meeting people. So it just ended up kind of being this organic thing. And then you like showing me different work, and yeah, just realizing it was something I could do. So yeah, and then, well, I guess I'll start sharing my screen now, but just so I can like kind of talk about my journey thus far. So yeah, I guess, you know, when you were talking about like when I first met you, yeah, I had just moved to New York. For everyone listening in, I had a spinal cord injury when I was 22, about to be 23, and that was in 2016. And so I had a spinal cord injury, and at first I was paralyzed from the legs down, and basically everyone was telling me that, you know, I'll never be able to walk again, like, you know, these kind of things. And so a few months after that, I started to be able to move my legs again. And, you know, flash forward, 2017, I applied to graduate school at NYU for sociology. Like that's the other thing, like I never really intended to do anything with photography. It was just something I kind of happened upon when I was in New York. Because my master's isn't an MFA, I got my master's in sociology, which I think has actually been like really helpful in this industry. Like, and I think like, yeah, you don't have to have a degree in photography or whatever. In some ways, I actually think it's more beneficial if you don't, because it helps you like think of stories in a more sociological manner versus just like as a strictly visual or like, I don't know, news thing. It becomes more of like a societal, like the underpinnings of it. Like I feel like I'm able to kind of get to the anthropological roots of things a lot easier because of that. But yeah, when I met you, I was working on, I was working on this project, which when I moved to New York, I was in this photography class, which is where Ash gave this lecture that like really, you know, inspired me. And at the time, it was a photojournalism class with Jeff Scales, who's the op-ed editor at the New York Times, Sunday Times. And yeah, I met this dude who you're looking at right now. His name's Alex, and he was my first friend in New York. And when I moved to New York, I was still using my wheelchair pretty much exclusively. I wasn't really able to really walk much around the city, and I was living in a small town before I moved to New York City, so it was like very jarring. But I went to this wheelchair basketball tournament because I had this open assignment. I could shoot whatever I wanted to, and so I wanted to go shoot wheelchair basketball because, you know, I didn't know anyone in the city, and in California, I had really a strong connection with the disabled community. All my friends were pretty much disabled because, you know, after my injury, I was in rehab, and just all the people I connected with had disabilities. It was a lot easier because when I would hang out with people who were able-bodied, and I was newly disabled, so like I really needed a community to like show me the ropes, you know, and just readjust to life. And so when I moved to New York, I wasn't actively seeking that, but I guess subconsciously I was. So yeah, I went to this wheelchair basketball tournament and I met Alex, and he was he's like my best friend pretty much. Like he kind of took me under his wing and showed me the city. He had this like accessible van, this Braun Ability like accessible van, which like people don't know. It's like this van that's like, it's really expensive, and it has this this ramp so wheelchairs can get in and out of it super easy. And so I was riding the train everywhere. My back would be killing me all the time. My leg, it was just really hard. And he was like, dude, like why the fuck are you taking the subway? Like, let's just go around in the van. And he would take me everywhere. Like he showed me, like for instance, this picture was taken out in like Jamaica, Queens, which is like really far out, like far from Manhattan and far from where I lived. And then, you know, he showed me like Harlem, and we went out to Staten Island and the Bronx. Like it was awesome to just like connect with someone like that, because, you know, he was raised out here and he had like all these connections and he knew all the spots. And he really, like, I mean, for this project, like this was like my first ever like thing I did with photography, was just documenting like my daily kind of routine hanging out with Alex. And yeah, I think that, you know, it was really nice to have that, because in New York City, I feel like it can be such a big, lonely place. But I mean, I eventually called my greater work on New York City like adopted family, because that's what it felt like. Like I just felt like an adopted son of New York. Like people just took me in, like no questions asked. And that meant like so much to me. Just because, you know, you can live in a city for years and years and never make like one genuine connection with someone. And I was just super fortunate that I happened to meet someone like Alex pretty much like 3 months into me living there. And he just like showed, like I said, he showed me the whole city. Like he was, yeah, I mean, he just never let anything slow him down, I guess, in a city that was like so inaccessible. Like you would never know it hanging out with Alex because, yeah, he would be fucking on the subway, just no matter what, he would always find a way to get there. He would push, you know, a mile and a half to get somewhere if he had to. He would find some way to get where he had to, and he like never complained about it ever. And I think like that's like something else in like the disabled community that like a lot of people maybe don't know about is like you know, I talk about like sympathy. Like I started this brand, it's called like Fuck Sympathy, because like the word sympathy actually means from like feeling pity or misfortune for someone else. And I feel like that's something a lot of people feel for people with disabilities. And like I've explained this a couple of times, but there's a really big difference between sympathy and empathy. And like sympathy is like, you know, like I said, it comes from people wanting to feel pity or miss for someone's misfortune. So at that point, you're basically saying, you think my existence is misfortunate because I'm disabled. And so when you have empathy, you're actually looking for a way to connect and to relate. And with sympathy, it's actually more selfish. It's more of a selfish thing for that person who's like, oh, I feel so bad for you. It's you know, it's a selfish thing for them. So like I think this picture
Wait,
is
Nolan,
yeah, go ahead.
you're like, I've always admired what you've had to say about sympathy and empathy. And I think as a spectator of your work, I feel very much that you've addressed both of those points visually, particularly in the work with, you know, with the homies that you made in New York from the disabled community. And I think, like, do you feel like that's something that you, when you're shooting, you're looking for moments that actually explain that?
I
Or are you
don't
just shooting,
know.
working it out?
I think it's more just working it out. Like I think just like subconsciously I was probably doing that. And I mean, I think that gets into like a whole different conversation of like being an insider of a community and an outsider of a community.
Yeah.
And I don't think like one or the other is actually better. Like I think as an insider of a community, you pick up on things that an outsider wouldn't,
Mm-hmm.
but you're also blind to a ton of things that an outsider is going to notice, and like vice versa. So I think like the reason why maybe that comes through in my pictures is because of my personal lived experience. Maybe I'm just not, it's just not registering in my head that like I have some sort of sympathy or empathy because it's like I'm living with that. So I'm maybe like my mind or my eye isn't attracted to like certain moments that like someone who is not living every day with a disability would be attracted to. But then like, you know, on the flip side, those people on the outside who are able-bodied, like I said, they're gonna catch things that I'm missing too, you know. And so I think like
Right.
some sort of truth is like somewhere in the middle of that,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
you know.
I mean, I
But yeah.
remember you may remember early on when you were doing you were working on this series.
Mhm.
And your pictures that you were showing me were of people that were so strong, like facing adversity or facing struggle and overcoming it. And I think one of the challenges that we faced when we were talking about like what constitutes this as an essay was, and now actually in this conversation I'm beginning to understand why that was such a challenge, but it was you making moments of vulnerabilities. And I wonder if you were pushing back at that time because you were scared of creating, or you were aware of creating some sort of sympathy versus empathy. But the vulnerabilities, of course, in the end helped it dramatically.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Yeah, I don't know. It was weird. Um, just coming in, like you said, I think I came into it like totally blind. And I think, yeah, finding the root of the photo essay for me, like now that I've been in it more, I mean, like this was like one of the first things that I ever did. So I didn't really, first off, I didn't really understand the concept of like what a photo essay was, just to be perfectly honest. I just like didn't really get it. But I don't know, I just kind of I wasn't approaching this from like a journalism standpoint, I was just approaching it how I always approached photography, which was as me documenting my friends. Like in high school, I had this little tiny, like crappy point and shoot, but I had that thing in my pocket like everywhere I went. And like, you know, I wanted this DSLR and blah, blah, blah. But like my family couldn't like afford that for me. So one day, you know, my mom got me this little point and shoot. And so like this, I basically was just applying that same logic to my life with a nicer camera. And I think it was also like, now that I was disabled and I was hanging out with, it just so happened to be all my friends were disabled. Like, I think it was you who kind of pointed out like, yo, like, this isn't just like you photographing your friends. Like, this is something deeper than that. Like, you're talking about a lot of things that go deeper, like societal issues and you know, like all your friends who are like either living in poverty or struggling, or the inaccessibility of the city. Like, these are things you're documenting without even realizing you're documenting them. Because yeah, like I said, I mean, to me, I was just literally applying the same logic as I would have with my point and shoot. Like, oh, I'm at a party, I'm gonna photograph that. Oh, my friends are playing wheelchair football, I'm just gonna take pictures of that. Like, that's just kind of how I always took pictures. I'm kind of like, I think it's been like the one thing I've been really compulsive about, you know.
Was there a point that you can identify at which you switched? Sorry about the background.
It's New York, it's okay.
Can you identify a point at which you switched, which you started like looking at all the folks you were photographing as not just friends, but also subjects, let's say, who could illustrate a wider truth as you understood it? Or has it always remained like that?
No, I mean, I think it's always remained like that to some degree, but like I said, I think, so that first project was my first semester in grad school, and I was taking like all these different sociology classes and anthropology courses and human rights and all this different stuff that I hadn't really been exposed to during my undergraduate career as like creative writing. I was just doing English and stuff. So, you know, I think I had always been, I think what really got me interested in sociology and all this kind of shit was actually skateboarding and hip hop, because both of those cultures, like, I just feel like there's so much about that without having to tell you it's about that. That's what I love about it. Like, everyone gets together. It doesn't matter where you're from or where you're at, what you're doing, what you like. Like, no one gives a shit. You're just all together. But when you really break it down, you have people who are rich, people who are poor, people who are Black, people who are Hispanic. Like that's what I always loved about hip hop and skateboarding. So I think between that and then finally actually learning how to contextualize that more in like an academic or intellectual standpoint, it was really useful. Because when I met Adi, who's the guy closing his hands with his eyes closed in the back left of this picture, I'd say this is like when I first started to like say, okay, like, I'm not just looking at my group of friends, but I'm looking at someone who is like a single father. I'm looking at someone who is still like managing to go to school, who is like living in the projects, who is like doing all this shit, like regardless. And like with disability, like there's just like such a stigma about people who like collect disability and people who are disabled of like being lazy and just like, you know, what, you know, it's just like you name the stereotype and like it's there with disability. And like, so when I met Adi, like we met at this wheelchair football game. And it's just like, I don't know, he's like my best friend. Like, I love that dude so much. Like, I'll get to it later in the talk, but I mean, we still talk like weekly. And that was like the cool thing about doing this, I guess, was like, it started as friends and then it became projects, but I was actually able to involve my friends with the projects. And now like I have them, you know, being way more collaborative with it and stuff. And, but yeah, I'd say when I first started to really look at it in like a deeper sociological standpoint was with Adi, because he was someone who was kind of like, yeah, I mean, he was living in really trying circumstances a lot of times. And at the same time, you know, he was someone who was just like this beautiful, like devoted father. Like,
I love this picture so much. My
yeah,
favorite picture of yours. You remember how many times you went back to get that picture?
Dude, I slept. I mean, that was the other thing. Like, I slept over. Like me, that's how I mean. Like me and Adi are like brothers. Like I don't know. Like I slept over. I can't tell you how many times I've slept in like the Wagner projects in East Harlem. Like it's just like it's a bunk bed. What happened in this picture actually is like I was sleeping on the top bunk. Adi was on the bottom bunk, and then his kids were like on the. I think there was another mattress. I forget. They changed up the spot since I've been there, but you know, I just woke up in the morning. I think it was like super early before the boys went to school, and he like hit his chin on the, I think on the dresser or something, and he was just like putting Vaseline on his chin and cleaning it. And I'm just like, I literally just woke up and I slept with my camera right next to me, and I was just like, I don't know, it just had. I only have like 2 frames of that actually. I just was there and gone, and I don't know, like, yeah. So when yeah, I'm like really, I guess that's the other thing, dude. I just feel really like fortunate and like privileged that like people, I'm like people have let me into their lives, not just as like a brother or a friend, but like as someone who's trying to like document the community and like kind of get the word out, you know? So it's, I mean, I'm so fortunate. It's hard for me to like find the words for it, but
Listen,
yeah, like
the other thing I want to say, what, like, just when you say community again, this is one of the things that blew my mind when you were doing this work. I remember you gave me an approximate number of how many people identify as disabled in New York, a city of, what are we at, 8 million people. So what was the number again, roughly?
I think it's people who identify as disabled. Oh, I don't know. Don't quote me on this. It's been a while since I've thought about this statistic, but I think it's something around 25%. And then in New York, 1% of the population, or I think it's 0.5%, less than 1% are wheelchair users. That's what it is.
Right.
Because disability is just such a big tree. Like you have, you know, cognitive disabilities and ambulatory disabilities and auditory, and
But the numbers
you know,
it's enormous. It is absolutely enormous. I mean, like the census recognizes almost 1 million people living with disabilities in New York City back in 2017. In a city of 8 million people. Now,
right.
of course, like you said, it's a huge umbrella. And if we're looking at people who use wheelchairs or various other, you know, other ways, it's still like for the issues that you are covering here and that you are bringing such a gentle eye on. Look, man, I do my best to read as broadly as I possibly can, but then I sit down and I have a coffee with you and I'm like, what the fuck? 1 in 8 people.
Yeah.
One way or another are like struggling with something, you know, but they grind, they get through it.
I mean, yeah, look at Adi. I mean, dude, the guy, that's what I'm saying. Like all my friends in New York, like, and like shout out to New York, dude. I fucking love that city because when I moved to New York, not only were the people just so great, but like as gnarly as that city is to navigate as someone with a disability, like it pushed me like so far in my recovery. And I think like if you can survive New York City as a person with like any kind of disability, like everywhere else I've gone has just been like a cakewalk. Like seriously, I'm not even joking.
I don't know, man. I don't know. Like I recognize that's you're a pretty positive person on some days, and today happens to be one of them.
Yeah.
That said, the stuff that you were telling me about, like that you guys were up against here, like,
oh yeah,
how far? Like, I would call you and say, you want to come and get a coffee with me, or you want to go hang out at the Cage on West 4th, and you'd be like, nah, man. Like the closest subway to where I am right now, it's 3 miles. It's going to take me an hour to get there.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, this is okay. So all of what I said isn't to downplay like how inaccessible and rough and kind of bullshit how it's not even just the city. I mean, it's just the world is just inaccessible. And New York City is really tough too because, I mean, a lot of my work was at first like really like it was focused on personal stories, but a lot of it just happened to be about accessibility because I mean, like you can't live in New York and not use the subway. Like it's kind of impossible, you know. And so, yeah, I mean, it's tough. Like whether it's inaccessible, and then the thing with accessibility is you could talk about it like in terms of the metro, but you can also talk about it in terms of employment. Like how many jobs are available for people like me who like, you know, it's not like I can just go out and get some job if I really have to like get money and just pull something. Like I can't lift 50 pounds. I can't sit for 8 hours a day at a desk because my back was just like, I just can't do it. And like, you know, so yeah, you can talk about inaccessibility from the physical barriers as far as getting into buildings, taking subways, crossing streets, making sure there's curb cuts. Like, you know, you can talk about like that, but you can talk about it from education. Like, how's the education system accessible? Is it at all? I mean, no. I had a few meetings at NYU where, because it was an old building, you know, they didn't have to remodel it or put an elevator or even put a ramp. So I'm like, you know, luckily I was able to walk, so I was able to, you know, get myself up the stairs. But I'm like, dude, if I was a full-time wheelchair user, like, dude, I would be fucked. Like, there's no way I'm getting into this building for this meeting I have to attend for class, you know, which is ridiculous. Or like my friend who was blind at NYU, the dorm she lived in had no braille on anything. Like, I'm like, dude, like, you know, so it's like education, it's employment, it's, I mean, you could look at any sector, like, yeah, transportation. You can almost look at any sector of society and just notice how it is built around an ableist narrative. You know, it's pretty.
Right. That's one of the things I think initially, like, I'm seeing it more now in your work, where you're promoting like a more integrated society. Let's not promoting, but like photographing a more integrated society. Whereas the stuff very early on, it was like the disabled community, and it's I don't want to say it's ghettoized, it's not the right word, but it's definitely segregated. And I remember, I think at the time that we met, you correct me if I'm wrong here, but my son was at a school, and it was a segregated school, like literally. And half of the school was for kids with some sort of disability, and it could have been hearing, it could have been vision, it could have been a wheelchair user, and then it was non-wheelchair users in the other side of the school. And so these two schools, like, completely separated and segregated, and I like separate buses for the kids. And I remember talking with you about this, like, because you've had, you know, because this happened to you later in your life, you've had the window on both sides, right? And I remember growing up, you know, in a different country, and it was completely normal to have kids with all manner of, you know, from all spectrums of life. It wasn't stigmatized, but I feel like we don't do very much to destigmatize and normalize different people's situations.
Yeah, and you know, honestly, too, I know from my friends who had congenital disabilities, meaning they were born with disabilities, versus people who, for lack of a better term, inherited them later in life, whether through degenerative disease or me, like an accident. I think a lot of it comes down to like parents having to really advocate for their children, like for those things. Like for instance, my friend Azalea, who's in this picture, and this picture, and this picture. You know, her mom and her family was always like, no, like, you're gonna just go to school. Like, you're not gonna go to like some special school. You're not gonna like, you're not any different. So we're not gonna treat you like you're any different, and you're just gonna like handle your shit, you know? And like, I have a lot of friends who were raised like that too. So, I mean, it's hard for me to say, but I do really think it comes down to, like, in a lot of ways, people who you have who are like advocating for you, you know, especially if you're a child, because you know, you learn a lot of things from your parents, and you soak a lot up from them. And so if your parents are always like telling you, yo, you can do this, like, you know, fuck what the school says, you're going to be in like the class with everyone else. And, you know, I think that's like a really good thing. Like, because yeah, when you just have like all the disabled kids like sectioned off, or like taking different buses, or in different parts of the school, like, I mean, you're not doing anything to normalizing it. It just others disability more and more and more. And so like people think, oh, well, you know what it is? I think it's just people being lazy. Honestly, like the education system, it's like, well, we should have all the deaf kids in one class because we don't want to have like accessible technology in all the classrooms. or we have 5 wheelchair. Go ahead.
It's like, and I mean, I agree with you. And I think it's such a simplistic, unfortunately, I think you're right, but it's such a simplistic way of looking at it, because the research that I've read from places like UNICEF, who specialize in like analyzing education practices in children and teens, everybody benefits from an inclusive classroom, for example, like speaking specifically about that. One of the things, like hearing you speak about this, and always, you know, having known you all these years, like I recognize you as a journalist, and I recognize that you have a very critical eye at what you're photographing and when drawing things into questions, drawing questions from society and the people that you're working with. But how do you actually see yourself? Because you're like, are you an advocate? Are you a journalist? Are you an observer? What are you? What do you do?
Dude, I don't know. I think the more, I swear to God, I think the more and more I get into it, I just get more confused. And I don't think that that's a bad thing, actually. I think it's actually a good thing. I don't know. I was
waiting for you to tell me to fuck my labels.
Well, yeah, pretty much. Like, I don't know, dude. Like, yeah, fuck your labels, dude. Like, fuck your labels. But yeah, I don't know. It's weird. The more I've learned about this industry or what I'm doing or myself, it's just more, it sounds trite to say this, but I just feel like the more you know, the less you know, kind of thing. So it's like, I mean, if someone asks me like what I do, I don't say like, oh, I'm a photojournalist, or like I'm a photographer, or I'm a documentarian. I think I used to do that, but now I'm like, dude, I do so many things, and sometimes I'm a journalist. Sometimes I like to do like fine art shit. Sometimes I like to make music. Like, I don't know, like I'm not just like one thing. And like I think that's the other thing too. When I first was like doing whatever you want to call it, whatever this is, documentary, photography, photojournalism, I was pretty like stuck in like, oh, this has to be one way. Like there's one way to do things.
Yeah.
And so I never thought, oh, how can I actually like combine all this stuff? How can I combine video and photography and audio? And can I make the soundtrack to my own video so I don't have to pay someone for copyrights? Like, I don't know. But like at first, like I just didn't really like think about it in those terms, you know. I was so focused on, yeah, like labels, I guess. And yeah, so now that
Sarah Terry must have been interesting, like really interesting to work with, not just for her incredibly intellectual approach to the world, an insightful approach, but her use of video and narrative. Like she's got it must have opened up your world from like hanging out with me in a coffee shop to like, oh my God, I can do it all.
Yeah, I mean, well, yeah, I guess I was really just trying to like, you know, and for lack of a better term, I was essentially just trying to be like you, you know, but that's like how creation goes. I feel like, I forget what the 3 things are, but it's like emulation, something else, and then innovation. Right. So it's like you emulate, I think it's like emulation, creation, and then innovation. So you emulate something, you replicate it, and then you decide, oh, I'm going to like actually innovate. And so for a long time, I was just like in that emulation mode, whether it was like you or like, I don't know, like Marielle and Mark, or, you know, whoever, you know, people I was like looking at. Yeah. So yeah, like I'm super grateful for Sarah Terry. Like, dude, she changed my life because she, like one of the things she had me do when, like the first time we spoke was through email, and she said, oh, I want you to like write me a letter about like what you want to get out of the next 2 years. Like, tell me everything you want to get out of it. And like one of the things I said was, I want to learn how to like, first off, I want to learn how to use color more, because I just never did. I saw you doing black and white and all these people I liked, and I was like, fuck it, I'm going to just like do black and white. And I'd say it's a lot easier to edit, I think, to be honest, but Anyway, regardless of that, nah, she helped me, like, yeah, she really helped me like realize that photography or whatever you want to call it isn't just one thing, or it doesn't have to be. You can do whatever you want, and there's no harm in like failing, because you never really fail, you just learn. Like if something doesn't work and it totally sucks, like you're like, okay, like that, then the other thing, you know, like it's never a fail, because I feel like I was always learning. And like she also really pushed me, this is a great segue, she pushed me to like really put myself in the narrative. Like she was like, and I've always, this is like something I'll always hold on to, is like any story we do, whether it's like you as a journalist or me as a documentarian or whatever, like I think for a long time I was like so caught up on like the ethics of things and blah blah blah, and you know, it's like when you're there photographing something, you're never separate from it. Like you're a part of that story, I think, no matter what. And you're drawn to certain stories for certain reasons. Like there's a reason why like someone wants to go photograph like, I don't know, like a small like group of people in like rural Ohio. Like, you know, it's not just by coincidence. You're like, oh yeah, like there's something like that you're not exploring enough that's like bringing you there, because like you don't have to go there. I mean, unless you're on an assignment, right? But even when you're on assignment, you're interacting, you're there, you're talking, you're taking pictures, like there's no way you can't be a part of something. And so like what Sarah told me, like within the work I was doing in Harlem, was like, she was like, where the fuck are you?
Huh. Right.
Where are you? She's like, these are all your homies, but like this is your community, right? These is your adopted family, like this is your crew. Like, where are you? I don't see you in any picture. And I was like, damn, like, but isn't that like unethical? Like, is it like, I don't know. You know what I mean? As a journalist, you're not like, oh, what's up? Like, I'm gonna be in the picture. Like, so I think like when we had that conversation, because like, and this kind of goes, so this is me like starting to kind of get there.
I just want to say, I adore this picture. This picture, like there's you've heard me say this before, Nolan, but there's images where, so there's a thing in the samurai tradition, right? Where you train so much, sword becomes no sword. You stop thinking about the actual practice of using your tool. And I think that this image, like your camera became your eye. Like I cannot feel the presence of a photographer. Like I feel you. I love this image so much. It's so natural. Like I am there with you.
Oh man, thank you so much, dude. Like that means a lot, because this image, yeah, this was hard, man. This is when, so I got out of my wheelchair. I was walking. I was exploring New York. I was like feeling like I was kicking ass. I was neglecting my health, is what I was doing. That's the truth, you know. And so I ended up back in the wheelchair for like 6 months, because I had just ruined my leg. Like my foot was just torn down to the bone, and it was bad, and I was just exhausted. So like, yeah, I mean, this is just one of those situations where the elevator was out and I had to get to class, and I wasn't going to pay $75 for an accessible Uber from Brooklyn to the West Village, like, because that's just insane. But yeah, so I had to, luckily I was still able to walk a tiny bit. So like I had to like flag these police officers down in Bed-Stuy, and I was like, can you please just like help me get my chair down? And the funny thing was, I wasn't even gonna like, I didn't even think about photographing it. I was like at the bottom, I was like waiting there, and I always just have my camera on me. And then I was like, oh wait, like I should take a picture of this, you know? I don't know. This was like when I started to try to like put myself in the narrative more, you know? But it's funny because I'm still not in the pictures, but it's from my personal perspective. Like I wrote an opinion piece from the first person. So this is me. I'm just not actually in the pictures. I just wanted to write about how people just constantly stare at me when I'm in public, whether I'm in a wheelchair or I'm limping around with my canes, or or even if I don't, and they're just fucking staring at my leg braces, you know? So like, it's funny because like a lot of people will say like, oh, well, when you point the camera at anyone, like they're gonna like stare at you or give you a weird response. And I'm like, yeah, that's probably true, dude. But like this project wasn't so much about like being pure journalism as like, oh, like this is the, you know, because if you walk up in front of anyone and just stare at them with a camera and take a picture, they're gonna be like, what the fuck are you doing, kind of thing. But this was just like me trying to illustrate how I feel people look at me all the time, regardless of whether I'm pointing a camera at them or not. And so, and sometimes I would do it as people I specifically noticed were like staring at me. Like this dude, I was like on the West Fourth courts and he just kept like looking at me and I was like, dude, like, God damn, like, fuck, like it just stopped looking at me, you know? Same with this guy, like I was just on the subway and he kept looking over at me. Like I would just be sitting there and I would notice him staring at me and then I would look away and again, and I was just like, dude, fuck you. And I like took my camera and I think the camera actually became like, I don't want to say a weapon, but it was like a mirror. It was, I felt like I was able to like reflect that gaze back at people because as soon as I would point the camera at them, they would get uncomfortable. And I'm like, now you know how I feel. Like,
Yeah.
like stop doing that. Like,
That's interesting.
yeah.
I mean, that's really actually fascinating. It's a fascinating way to, oh my God, this picture. It's a fascinating way to approach it because that's one of the things with photography is that we often use it to hold up a mirror to ourselves, right? And you're actually doing it literally in person on a crowded subway.
Oh my God. Yeah, it was, and then like I also like this picture too, because as much as I like rail on people for like staring at me or like just not understanding disability and stuff, like I kind of get it though. Like, because little kids are just like, they don't know right from, like this kid doesn't know what he's doing, but I just noticed little kids, anytime I roll by them in my wheelchair or like if I limp by, they're just like awestruck. Like, what is this? So I don't think like the staring always comes from like a malicious intent.
Mm-hmm.
I think people are also genuinely curious because there's no education about disability. People don't understand disability. So there's just like this, oh, like shit, like I don't see that a lot, or I don't really see people with leg braces and two canes. Like they're like, in some ways it can be really, I mean, honestly, it's really annoying, but I try to also empathize with people and say, okay, like they're curious. So I can either get mad or I can like exploit their curiosity to teach them something.
Right. And that's one of the roles that you're really, I think that you've really filled. Oh my God. And that like, it's so, this work is so good. It's like such a it's a journal, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's one of the roles that you've filled so beautifully. Like another thing that you do among the gazillion things that you do is like this work is so expressive, but it's so educational as well. Like you've taught me with your words and now your images, what your experience is and what I should be lobbying for with friends or colleagues or opportunities that I have with people in power. You know, like I think it's really effective. And I think like the more you get this stuff out there, the more likely we are to see actual change.
I hope so. I mean, it was pretty cool that like I was able to speak on New York One about this.
Yeah.
Like that was pretty crazy. But it was sick because like I got to go on New York One, like basically just like preach human rights for like 2 or 3 minutes of like primetime news air, which was really sick. Like I was like, fuck yeah, like it was like super subversive. I was like, yes, like I get to like use this, and it was awesome. Like, cause the guy kept trying to like steer it in another direction, and I was like, no, like we're talking about how fucked up this stuff is and like human rights and stuff. Yeah, so I'm glad, dude. I'm lucky I've had platforms. Like I've got to speak on New York One, like Philadelphia Museum of Art. I get to do stuff like this. Like I've got to talk through to Getty and Verizon and just so many different networks. And I feel like that's such a great like privilege. And but yeah, anyway, so I guess I'll segue to this, like, which is I just wanted to start giving my friends cameras. And this just happened by accident as a double exposure, but I was teaching my friend Adi how to use a Hasselblad because like I just always felt like when people do participatory media projects, they like give them little like crappy disposable point and shoots. And like that's cool. Like it's accessible, everyone knows how to use it. But I was just kind of like, dude, how sick would it be to like teach my friends how to use like this giant gnarly like camera and like I don't know, it's just so fun to like it became like educational too because I was like teaching them about the camera and they were like super interested. And that's a picture Adi took of me, which I fucking love. I love this picture so much. But yeah, it's just like, I guess I took, like, this happened right before COVID. So like, this was taken in like between January and March. Like I was just starting to like go to Harlem and give my friends the camera and like us take pictures of each other. Because I was thought about a lot what Sarah said and I was like, you know what? Like, we have a lot of agency with like, so yeah, I was giving my friend Azalea a camera to document like her life. And it was just like, yeah, like why shouldn't my friends have agency and how they get to represent themselves too? Like I see their lives in a certain way. And even though like I'm in the disabled community, I'm also not them. Like, you know, there's insider outsider like relationships, like, and then there's like microcosms of that. And I also just, I wanted to start putting myself in the story more. I was like, yeah, I guess like I'm not really separate from this. Like this is part of it, you know? Yeah, it was sick, dude. I don't know. I can't wait to go back to Harlem and continue this, man, because this is like where it was starting to get like super exciting.
Dude, now is the time. You got to come back. Like the sun is out in New York. Like people are back on the streets. Vaccines are available. Like get your ass over here.
Dude, I'm trying. Oh, I love this picture so much. Picture.
I've never seen it. Wow.
Yeah, no, this is all unreleased. Like I mean, this is the first time I'm like publicly speaking about this. But yeah, so like Tia's favorite toy she has is this wheelchair Barbie because she didn't even take it out of the box because she loves it so much. And so for like a 5-year-old girl to not rip a Barbie out of the package is like, I don't know. I'm just like, dude, that child must just like love that. Like the love between that is so strong. Because to have like the willpower to not do that because you love something so much. And it's, you know, because she sees her mother represented in pop culture. Like when do you ever see a Black woman in a wheelchair like as a Barbie? I mean, like that, I don't know. I think like shout out to Barbie for that. I don't know about all the other shit they've done.
It's an unbelievable picture. Wow.
And so I gave her like some disposable cameras. I was teaching her how to use the Hasselblad. I got this little like Sony RX100 that they've been shooting. I just send them SD cards whenever they need them. And I haven't got them back yet. So I'm like really excited to see like what's been happening. And at the same time, I'm still taking some pictures. Like, I don't know. Like I really like this one. It's like one of my favorite portraits. I just really like it because you don't really get to see like, I don't know, you know, parents with disabilities. Well, specifically Azalea, like when she got pregnant, you know, she has cerebral palsy and everyone was telling her, oh, you shouldn't have a kid. Like that's fucked up. Like, you know, dude, yeah, people in the street who didn't like strangers would come up to her and just like start to lecture her on like how irresponsible she was.
Oh my God, kill us all.
Dude, you know what I mean? And it's just like, dude, she's like one of the best mothers I've ever met. And like the relationship she has with her daughter is just so fucking strong and beautiful. And like, I don't know. I just
like they're beautiful.
I know. And it's just, it's frustrating how like, I think like people just want to, because people don't understand the disabled community, they try to just, they think they know what's best for us. And it's just like, you don't.
Right. That's the thing. Like, yes. More. Voices. We need more voices.
more voices, and instead of telling people what they need, ask them what they need.
Yes.
Don't just say, you need this. Yo, what do you want? What do you need? That's like something that never happens. Like people never ask for what they need. They're told what you get. You're told what you get. You don't ask for what you need. And so like, this is like the last picture I took before. This was like actually when COVID was happening. This was like March 8th or 9th.
Uh-huh.
And one of our friends in the community passed away. Not from COVID, but from something else. She had just a really gnarly seizure. Yeah.
Nolan, I think we should stop on March 8th and roll into questions, because I'm sure that we have them.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Indeed. Yes.
You've got a lot more work, I know. So I urge everybody watching to go to Nolan's website, which is in the chat, and explore his work more thoroughly.
How do I stop sharing?
So Nolan, we got a couple of questions from the audience, and one of them, you were talking a lot about putting yourself into the narrative and the issues of that. Jacqueline asks, how has photographing people living with disability impacted your perception of yourself after your accident? Has it changed it, or has it stayed the same? And if so, why?
It's really changed it a lot. I'm like so much more, I just embrace it to the fullest degree. Whereas like, I think because I had a disability later on in life, there was always like at first this pushback I had, like, oh, I want to like get back to normal, or like, you know, I was like, I'm gonna walk again and be running and doing all this stuff, and like I didn't want to be called disabled or anything. And like the more time I photographed people in the community, and then started to like be like, oh, you know what, like these are my people, like I love, like this is where I belong, you know. Like I kept trying to fit into like an able-bodied world or like an able-bodied society, and it was just like, why am I doing that? Like I don't have to do that. I fit in perfectly here with all my friends and people who actually understand me. Like I don't know why I'm holding on to this previous thing that doesn't give a shit about me. It was, yeah, so I just have more empathy for myself, for sure. I think I was really hard on myself for a long time, and I guess I still am. It's like something I work on a lot, just being nicer to myself. But yeah, it's definitely given me a lot more empathy. Yeah.
There's a question from Suleiman. He asks, how can we ensure that photography supports disabled people and is made accessible to us without adding to ableism?
I mean, that's a good question. I think it's all about like, I mean, honestly, you need people in the industry who are going to give you opportunities. I mean, if it's going to be widespread, like, I mean, you can always build your own little thing and have your own little niche thing. But like, I think one, photography of people with disabilities or photography by people with disabilities gets broken into the mainstream more, like then it becomes, you know, then it gives people a reason to listen to it more and to like try and understand it more. And I think like making photography accessible for people with disabilities is like really challenging, because like, for instance, with my friend Azalea, she has CP and she can't really like, it's really hard for her to use a camera. And then like I have another friend, like I said, who has like really limited vision. So I don't know, like I think there are definitely more accessible photography tools out there, like remote triggered things, and then people getting assistance to help them with stuff. But yeah, I mean, I guess in a way that always fits into an ableist agenda, because if there's anything, basically in, you know, disability studies, like there's this thing called equal facilitation, which means that you don't need anyone else to access something. So like, if I need to get into a bar to go have a drink, I don't need to like press a button and wait for someone and have them bring a ramp out so I can get into the bar. It's just, I can just get in if I want to. And I think like, yeah, they're just, I think technology has made photography a lot more accessible, especially with digital and with phones. And there's just so many more options now. But I guess like a way to subvert that is like what you use it for and how you use the technology and how you want to get it out. Like, because you know, I guess all of this technology for the most part is designed for people who are able-bodied, like as far as camera systems and stuff go. I don't know of any camera system that's been specifically designed for people with disabilities. Maybe there's stuff in the iPhone. I'm not really too sure, but anyway, I think it's about taking that technology and subverting it. You know, I think like that's how you can win. Yeah.
Do you think that in addition to the obvious but such important questions about infrastructure and the technology and so on, that ableism has shaped photography, the practice of photography in other ways? Is it kind of?
Oh yeah. Oh my God, 100%.
And where do we see that? Where are the traces of that?
Oh my God, just tell anyone to go on assignment. It's fucking brutal for me. Like I still do it, but it's tough, man, because people expect you to like, and some places expect you to like shoot video and do this and have 2 different bodies. And like, before you know it, you have your laptop and a wireless router and your hard drive. Like, dude, I got to carry all that shit with me. And then you expect me to be out on like an 8-10 hour day. Like, and you want me to get all this different, it's tough. And even when it's not something like that, where it's assignment where maybe you're covering like, you know, like an event or a protest or something like that, even a lot of times with like, you know, the accessibility of like where the proximity to what you're covering, how long your days are. Like for me, if I'm having a day with like brutal nerve pain, which could be any day, it just happens. You know, if I have an assignment that day, I mean, you know, I got to suck it up and do it, and I do it. But like, I can't just call my editor and be like, yo, like my nerve pain is so bad right now that like I can barely get out of bed. Like, can we reschedule the assignment? Like, that's not a thing. Like people, and I think it's also, yeah, people in the industry there aren't many working photographers in my situation. Like I know one other guy who was in Houston who has the same injury as me, spinal cord injury, and you know, he uses braces and he's still able to walk. And then I know a couple other photographers who are amputees. But like as far as working photographers with ambulatory disabilities, because like, okay, yeah, you can have disabilities like, you know, cognitive or, you know, all these other disabilities, but when you have like ambulatory or like, you know, maybe it's your vision or something, but the ambulatory has been really tough for me because a lot of times in photography, you're expected to physically do so much and go so far and stand for long periods of time and get so much stuff done and file immediately. And it's like, dude, do I have time to even like stretch my back for 30 minutes if it's like spasming? I don't know, you know? So yeah, I mean, it's just, I mean, but that's just, yeah, like photography is pretty inaccessible. I think like one of the main reasons I've been able to do as much as I have been able to do is because I still do have the ability to walk if I need to. And so for people who don't, like, if you have an assignment that's on a river or something, you can't do it because there's probably not going to be an accessible trail there. There might not be accessible parking. There might not, you know, so it just really limits the scope of what you do in a lot of ways. And, you know, people find ways to do things. I've definitely had to, you know, MacGyver some stuff and do some funky shit to make something happen. But that is, you know, I think editors need to, when they're working with someone with a disability, need to be understanding and accommodating of what people need, because you can't apply this, you can't expect me to do the same thing that Ash is going to do, because Ash is, first off, just fucking a madman, but second off, I mean, the guy is just fully able-bodied. Like, I mean, to expect that same amount of shit from me is you know, you should expect something different, and it doesn't mean it's going to be less than. You just have to
Yeah, man. Yes, so well said.
Yeah.
Have you been getting assignments from agencies, editors, publications, websites, and have they chosen you differently to bring this particular perspective, or are they then surprised and then they're like, oh, we have to think about it or whatever?
Yeah, it's been both. I've had some editors who are like pretty understanding, and I'm like, yo, like, this is the situation. Like, I'm not going to be able to file right at 5 p.m. because I can't carry my laptop and hard drive and charger and, you know, all this shit with me. I just have to carry bare bones because I can only put so much weight on my back. So instead of filing at 5, I'm gonna be filing probably at like 8:30, you know? And they're like, okay, like, you know, it would be dope if you could do it at 5, but you know, we get it, like, it's okay. But then I've had other editors or producers who've reached out to me to do assignments, and I've told them what I need, and they're just like, oh, well, like, that's not in the budget, so go fuck yourself, kind of thing. And like, I guess, you know, that, I mean, negotiating contracts is hard enough when you don't have a disability, but like, for instance, when I go to do an assignment in like Houston or something, I need to factor in probably an extra $600-700 for taking Ubers places, because I can't just walk 2 miles from here to here to here. Like, and the, you know, if there's like, I need to factor that in. And if people are like, well, we don't have an extra $600 to factor in for transportation, then it's like, you can take it or leave it. Luckily I've grown enough to where I can say no to things now. But back in the day, I would have said yes and put myself through hell to get an assignment. And now I'm like, you know what? Like, nothing is worth me being in like an excruciating amount of pain to like get an assignment because someone doesn't want to work with what I need. So like, if people aren't willing to at least meet me halfway, I get it. Like, with budgets, you can only do so much sometimes. But like, if you're not, you know, if you're not even willing to meet me halfway, then like, why am I gonna fucking kill myself for your organization? You obviously don't care about me. So
There's
that's
a
how I feel.
question.
I don't know. Maybe I don't know. I don't know if that's harsh, but that's just how I feel. Yeah.
There's a question from Paula, who describes herself as a photographer with a recent disability. She wants to ask whether you ever work with an assistant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
Yeah,
how
often.
does that work?
Luckily, a lot of times, well, I just have an amazing wife, so, and an amazing life partner. So if she has like time off of work, or I'm around the house, especially with like me doing self-portraits, like that whole, I didn't get to go into it in the talk, but I did this whole series of self-portraits. And really, if I was going to credit the picture, it should be like Jackie and Nolan, because like, she helps me with that shit so much. Like, I'll have her press the shutter sometimes, or use her as a model, or she'll, if I'm going somewhere, like when I was on assignment earlier this year, you know, I had a tripod and an extra camera and like my backpack, and she was like helping me carry all that stuff, you know? And so like the only is, oh, and you know, I worked with my boy Cheney too. He's helped me a lot too. He's the homie. So it's just about like finding people you trust and who, like, you know, who trust you. And if you have a good rapport with them, it's like, dude, they're not going to make a big deal out of it. And if I ever was on assignment where I needed to find an assistant, I would definitely vet people. Like, I would say, all right, like, this is what I need. Like, can you manage this, you know? Because I need to feel safe out in the field, and I need to trust whoever I'm with, because if I start to have like some gnarly back spasm and I'm like, you know, I need someone to like press on my back super hard because it's the only way it's going to release, I need to know that you're okay doing that. You know, you're not going to be like,
can you come to New York? I'll get your back and I'll carry your shit. No problem.
Sick. All right, let's do it.
Come on.
Let's do it. We'll go to Harlem. But yeah, so just find someone that you trust and that you know, that's going to help you out because they want to, not because they feel bad for you. Yeah.
And there's a question about what's going to happen to the work that you've been showing us. Are you planning a book? Are you planning an exhibition? Are you planning other forms of circulation and distribution?
Yeah, I've been planning to do a lot of things, but you know, the best laid plans. So I mean, I don't know, this book, I have a book publisher who I've been like talking with now for the past 3 years, and she was, when I first showed her the work, she was like, oh, it's ready, like, let's publish it. And I just don't feel like, I feel like once I go back to Harlem and I'm able to continue the work that got shut off, I think once that chapter can finally come together, like that work will be ready finally. And it's just a lot of coordinating because, you know, all my friends still, like, they're still parents and single parents and working jobs, and they're still living their own lives. So, you know, I really want them to be the main writers of the text. And so to like workshop text and to get pictures from them, and you know, it's a big process. So Sarah Terry, you know, shout out to Sarah Terry again. You know, I was like rushing myself. Oh, I got to do a book now. I got to do a book now. And she's like, dude, why? Like, there's literally no deadline. Like, why are you so anxious to do this book? Like, just calm down. Like, get it where it needs to be. It's going to be your first statement, really, as like a photographer, your first book. Like, don't ever like compromise that or rush it just because you're feeling anxious or you have to do something with it. And then, yeah, with my self portraits, I'm still working on that, but I want to. That's like kind of more like, I don't know, I don't know what it's documentary, fine art, whatever. But I'm definitely want to try to get some more like grants and fellowships to continue that work, and then hopefully put that up in like a gallery or museum somewhere and have like an interactive. I have this dream of like making people understand what I go through physically, because like every time I walk around, it's kind of the equivalent of someone who's able-bodied walking with like 30-pound weights on both their legs. So I kind of want to do something where like people get to strap weights to their legs and like put a little something under their foot so they're uneven, so they're kind of walking with, I don't know, like I want to do something kind of trippy like that, where it's more immersive than just looking at a bunch of nice, pretty pictures on the wall.
And you know, you were deeply embedded in the community you were photographing, and you're obviously very close to members of that community. Did they use your work to raise these issues in the community itself, or with local authorities and so on? And if so, how has that happened?
I haven't seen anyone do with local authorities, but what's cool about the work that I've published with my friends is like, for instance, I did a whole story on my friend who runs an adaptive boxing program, and the story ran in the Sunday Times. And after that, I mean, he had so many people hitting him up. Like, I forget what it was, like ABC News did a documentary on him. And then like, I think he did something with like Google, and he was on a commercial, and like, like he did a TED talk at Yale, like getting to talk about like his love of like adaptive boxing and accessibility and stuff. So it's like nothing's been done like structurally, because, you know, I mean, trying to fight the city is like, I don't know. I think people are better off just spreading their own gospel, whatever it may be, and getting to affect the people around them, because I believe that's where real social change happens. Like, just because a law exists doesn't mean people aren't going to violate it. I mean, I'm glad there are laws that exist that prevent certain things from happening, but just because, you know, it might be in the law books that it's illegal to have 3 steps in front of your restaurant, there's going to be plenty of restaurants with 3 steps in front of them. It doesn't stop anyone from doing that. But if you can affect people in your life that you know directly, and show them, you know, if I can show them my life, or he can show them his life, and explain to them like maybe the struggles he has, or the hopes and dreams he has, and maybe the things in the way, then that person's going to care about that. And, you know, it's kind of like this domino effect. So yeah, I think a lot of social change happens in your close circle with like the people that you interact with on a daily basis. That's where I see it taking place the quickest. Like, waiting on New York City to do something is like, I mean, they've been waiting. So like, we can't really wait anymore, I guess. I don't know. It's hard. It's hard.
I think that's a pretty compelling place to wrap up, actually. I like that. I like that message of kind of people taking social change in their own hands and not relying on authorities, and kind of change through living differently and so on. And I get the impression that that's kind of been one of the impacts on you, Ash, is that sort of working with Nolan is kind of getting that sense of living differently.
Yeah, very much so. Like
Yeah.
you opened a whole world to me, Nolan, that I've got other friends that I've explored this with, but you opened it in a different way, and I will forever be in your debt for that. I thank you.
Yeah, and I think we will for this conversation. I think it's been extraordinary, actually. It's been the work is fantastic, but the conversation is even more powerful than the work in some ways, and powerful with the connecting to the work and that. So thank you very much, both of you, for conveying that experience. Thank you, Nolan, for showing that work and talking about that. Ash put Nolan's Instagram link in the chat for people to follow up on that. And we look forward to seeing where you're going. And thank you to all the participants for attending today.
Yeah,
We'll
thank you
finish
very
there.
much. Thank you. Thanks, Ash. Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone. Yeah.